Chapters 7 through 12 of Isaiah form a distinct unit known as the Book of Emmanuel. The historical context is defined by sudden, devastating collapse. At the end of chapter 10, the text tracks the aggressive advance of the Assyrian army. They conquer the region town by town, pushing until they stand at the gates of Jerusalem. Before they can strike, divine intervention occurs. Isaiah uses the imagery of an iron axe cutting down a thick forest to describe the Lord dismantling the Assyrian Empire. Assyria is decimated, falling never to rise again. Judah receives a different judgment. The Davidic kingdom is cut down, sending Israel into exile, but the lineage remains as a living stump. This sets the stage for the opening of chapter 11. From that seemingly dead, ruined stump of Jesse, a fresh shoot emerges. A messianic figure grows directly from the roots. The Davidic line, reduced to a stump, now serves as the foundation for an entirely new kind of king. Understanding how this ruined lineage brings about total restoration requires analyzing the most debated imagery in the book of Isaiah. Verses 6 through 9 describe the characteristics of this king's domain, the peaceable kingdom. The text pairs natural enemies together. The wolf dwells with the lamb, the leopard lies down with the goat, and the lion eats straw like an ox. This creates a tension for the reader. Does the prophet predict a physiological alteration of wild animals, or is he using a poetic device to describe a human reality? These verses function as a diagnostic test. Because the imagery is so extreme, it forces scholars to commit to a specific framework to process the impossibilities. This analytical tool helps organize the specific theological frameworks used to read these verses. The horizontal axis represents the specific literary method a scholar uses to read the words on the page. The vertical axis represents the theological timeline, dictating when the events of the prophecy occur in history. How a scholar resolves the biological impossibilities of this single passage reveals their assumptions about the mechanics of all biblical prophecy. Before examining the kingdom, we must establish the power of the king. Verse 2 describes the branch's specific endowment by the Spirit. 6 distinct aspects of the Spirit's power rest upon him, grouped in pairs: wisdom and understanding, counsel and might, knowledge and the fear of the Lord. Because he possesses this deep spiritual knowledge, his judgment is absolute. He does not rule based on superficial sight or the hearing of his ears. This absolute authority introduces an eschatological horizon in verse 4, stating that with the breath of his lips, he will slay the wicked. In the English translation, the phrasing suggests a collective plural. It sounds like a general judgment of many unrighteous people. The Apostle Paul isolates this exact verse in 2 Thessalonians 2:8 and applies a specific interpretation. Paul shifts the Hebrew word for breath, ruah, to the Greek equivalent, pneumati. He then identifies the target as a singular individual, the lawless one, or the Antichrist. By recontextualizing a general judgment into the defeat of a specific enemy, the New Testament ties the ultimate fulfillment of this power to the Second Advent. Returning to the matrix, we can test 3 distinct interpretive methods on the x-axis, as outlined by scholar John Oswalt. We begin with the literalistic method. A literal reading of the lion eating straw, for instance, requires a physiological alteration of the animal's nature. It also leads to debates about the fossil record, questioning whether animal death and the food chain existed prior to the fall in Eden. A second option is the spiritualistic or allegorical method. Here, the animals represent spiritual states within human beings. The breakdown of this approach is visible in the historical commentary of Campagius Vitringa. Vitringa suggests the cow represents a mature Christian producing milk, and the straw represents simple gospel doctrine. The flaw in this approach is the lack of internal controls. If straw denotes simple doctrine here, but represents false teaching elsewhere, the system lacks stability. Allegorization relies entirely on the ingenuity of the exegete, rather than the intent of the prophet. This leaves the figurative method as the necessary third approach. The figurative approach utilizes an extended metaphor of passive animals to make one overarching point: the total removal of external danger. If the text is figurative poetry about ultimate safety, the y-axis of the matrix determines when this era is established in history. The post-millennial timeline, supported by scholars like J.A. Alexander and Franz Delitzsch, places this fulfillment in the current age. In this framework, peace is realized progressively. As the gospel transforms the habits of wicked men, society itself is gradually pacified. The amillennial view, represented by scholars like E.J. Young, takes a stricter stance on the presence of evil. This view relies on a rule articulated by Wilhelmus à Brakel: wherever there is sin, there is a lack of peace. For the amillennialist, partial fulfillment occurs during the church age, but absolute peace is restricted to the sinless eternal state. The premillennial view argues that these conditions of global safety cannot be met by the current spread of the gospel. They argue that cosmic peace is actualized only during a future millennial reign, established physically by Christ after his return. Scholar J. Barton Payne suggests this passive animal behavior will be limited strictly to Mount Zion, while wild animals elsewhere remain carnivorous. The hermeneutical method dictates how to read the poetry of the text, but the scholar's eschatological framework governs when they believe the peace of Christ actually invades history. Moving past the debated animal imagery of verses 6 through 9, the chapter culminates with a declaration in verse 10. The root of Jesse transforms into an ensign, a rallying banner drawing all nations to himself. The verse concludes by stating, "His rest shall be glorious." Historically, the Latin Vulgate translated the Hebrew word for rest here as sepulchre or tomb. This error pointed generations of readers toward a geographic burial site in Jerusalem rather than the intended theological reality. The true Hebrew root word implies a state of profound peace. It connects to Christ's later offer of true rest to the heavy laden. Across all competing eschatological camps, there is agreement on the text's core claim. The Messianic reign systematically dismantles external danger. A devastating historical judgment of Israel produced a seemingly dead stump, and out of those roots grew a living king endowed with total justice. The prophecy of the shoot and the branch ensures that the Messiah's rule will eventually bring about a state of total global security.